Hello everybody and welcome to Vicky Pattison, The Secret To. This week I am joined by none other than Made in Chelsea OG, reality legend, podcaster and now author. It's Caggie Dunlop, everybody. Woo!
I lost that. What high energy start. I love that you can just turn it on like that. It's awesome.
Did you think it was high energy or did you think it was a little bit manic? Because I could easily be accused of either.
I mean, potato, right? I can relate to the kind of manicness. So
it's just one of them days, lass. And I think women, I honestly am not trying to be sexist in the slightest. It would be such a terrible tone to start the podcast off with. But I feel like women would just completely take on too much in every arena, you know? And we're wearing all these different hats all the time. And today I'm podcast host. I'm also dog mom and I'm trying to tidy the full house. I've got shopping to do. I've got in-laws to greet tonight. And
it's too much.
It is, babe. It's too much. And I feel like I just want to focus on having this wonderful chat with you because I'm so excited. But in the back of my mind, it's been you fucking need to do this. You need to do that. You need to do that. And I just need to breathe and concentrate on you.
It's also the roles you have to play with it. You can schedule out your day. You're like, okay, I'll do that in that hour, that in that hour, that in that hour. But you're having to wear multiple hats throughout the day. And I think you're right. It's women tend to do that. And we tend to kind of say yes to things when we don't really have the space and put ourselves at the bottom of the list in terms of priorities. So I feel
always come last. We'll always come last. I feel like we just think we can do it all. We're super women. I don't know. Again, I'm going to be sexist. Fuck it. I'm getting right on my tits today. This is more a reflection of him than it is men everywhere. But I don't know. I just don't think men do one thing and they do it slowly and methodically. And granted, they can do it well. But of course they can do it well because they're not doing a million other things as well. Well, that's me rant over with. It's really nice to have you.
Oh, it's so nice to be here. Thank you for having me on.
Where are you, Cags? It looks really nice. Is that a mic in the background?
That is. I just realised you can see So I'm in my flat in London and as of yesterday, I've decided that I'm going to bring the podcast studio into my home and we're now filming it. So that's what you can see in the background because I'm a Taurus. I like being at home. So I was like, well, let's just bring everything in-house, literally.
Is that a Taurus thing, is it?
Yeah.
I just thought that was a woman in her 30s thing because I don't like leaving the house either.
I mean, it might be that too. I don't like leaving the house unless I have to.
Honestly, mate, I am such a miserable owl to boot. I was thinking, it was, do you know what it was? It was Joey Essex and he asked us to come to see him in Dancing on Ice on Sunday night. And I mentioned it to Erkan, who's obviously 6 years my junior, and he was like, oh my God, that'll be amazing. Yeah, let's definitely go. And I was like, let's take a breath. Obviously we've got to try and find someone for the dogs. Sunday's the day where I get ready for the week ahead. Are we rushing into this decision? And then I had to catch myself and I was like, oh my God, when did you become this person who literally just doesn't want to leave a house, has to plan for the week ahead, fucking meal preps, does a shopping? I've turned in, I've warped into me mother overnight.
And also I think, our 20s were so different, but particularly yours and mine was probably so different. That's the thing. And me in my 30s, I'm my 20-year-old self would not recognize me, but I'm so glad that I did change.
Kat, I always say, whenever anybody asks us in interviews, they always go, what advice would you give your younger self? And I'm like, my younger self wouldn't fucking take advice from me because she'd think I was a boring, weird old pale cow. She'd think I was such a freak. She'd be like, who's that old miserable weirdo? No way am I taking advice from her. And that I just think, I also think when I was in my 20s, I fucking thought I knew it all. Did you not?
I think everyone does because you think you're an adult, and in many ways you are because you're allowed to do the things you weren't when you were, a teenager or a child. But actually, you're not mature at all. You're allowed to do things, but you actually can't manage them. No. So, my 20s were all over the place. I love them, but I wouldn't go back.
Yeah, well, I often think you're 20. People say youth's wasted on the young, don't they? And it's quite true.
It is true.
I've
now we've got to that point. Who'd have thought you and me be like, Youth is wasted on the young.
I am actually old before me time, though. I'm going on like I'm 60. But no, mate, honestly, this year I've done me back in, right? And do you want to know how? Sleeping on the fucking sofa with the puppy. That's all it takes. That's old, Caggie. Like, I'm officially like, I've slept funny and now I can't walk. That's who I am. And I don't know, like, I just took for granted, like going out for 3 days on end when I was in my 20s and then just being able to roll into work and, without just needing one paracetamol. I honestly, if I knew everything I knew now, my 20s would be so much better because I don't think I'd be so hard on myself. I was cruel to myself in my 20s. Were you?
So was I. Like, I always say when people say, what's your piece of advice? It's the only wrong step is not taking one. Because I think, especially towards the later part of my 20s, I became so scared of making the wrong move because I had been quite reckless and made mistakes that I thought, oh God, I don't trust myself and what I'm going to do. And actually started to feel like a bit of a failure towards the end of it. Like everyone else had it all figured out. And because I had been quite like reckless and wild, I thought that I would never kind of get my shit together.
Mate, honestly, I can relate to that so much though. Like, and also you feel this extreme amount of pressure as well, don't you? Because
huge pressure.
You're so recognized and like as being like, whether it's a party girl or whether it's, someone who's like a bit flighty in relationships or whether it's like someone, I was forever being like labeled like, oh, she's broke up with another fella. She cannot make another relationship work. Here she is. I remember being on the front cover of a magazine with fucking Mario Falcone and Spencer Matthews and me in the middle, right? And they've picked, Caggie, the shittest picture of me. Both the lads, right? Just obviously the handsome fellas are in fucking really lovely relationships now. I'm not saying anything disrespectful, but yeah, they're like, I remember the lads looked really lush and they'd picked this one of me like walking into Loose Women with like my hair all over the place and like no makeup on and probably hadn't washed my spray tan off because I was like luminous. And it was like Vicky caught in a love triangle and all this. And I was like, you fucking dicks, man. Like I wasn't even with Mario. Like me and Spencer had a date or something. But I just remember thinking I was being painted as this real like crazy woman who never had anything figured out and was always a bit of a bit of a car crash,
Yeah.
So I put all this pressure on myself. I was so desperate to find the right man and settle down and be everything that everyone thought I wasn't. And I rushed into the wrong things with the wrong people because of that.
Really? Because the press are notoriously cruel towards women. And especially, I think, the quicker you'll rise to fame, the quicker they are to kind of push you up and then like rip you back down.
It's
and
a thing.
It's a thing. And all those narratives around women like in dating. I mean, the person that comes to mind that doesn't have it anymore, but did have it the worst, like Taylor Swift. You remember every time she dated someone, it would be like, oh, another one bites the dust and like can't hold down a man. Whereas for a man, they're like, oh, Lothario, like look at him, eternal
Lady
bachelor. Like, yeah. And it's like, wait, we're doing exactly the same behavior. In fact, that the men are probably dating more women, and then we get labeled as the sort of, oh, isn't it tragic?
She just can't find a man. Like I remember reading that about myself and being like, fuck off, as if I'm really looking like I'm having a nice time. Oh, but you do, like, yeah, it's so sexist. I mean, I feel like it's been
misogyny,
an unintentional, total unintentional theme of the podcast. I was saying to my producer before you jumped on, I was like, I wonder if Caggie's all right to talk about Made in Chelsea because, and listen, I'm going to be dead honest, I fucking loved you on that show, Cag. Like I am going to be really embarrassing now and actually say like I wanted to be you. I hate myself for admitting that to your face, but I just had to, and I feel like it's nice. And I don't mean like in a kind of wear your skin way. I'm not weird. I just mean in a like, oh God, she's so effortlessly cool and all the boys want to kiss her and she's pretty naturally and I can see why. And isn't she fun? And don't I want to be her friend? In that kind of way.
That's so sweet. That's really nice to hear because I am sometimes a bit squirmish about talking about it, but it depends who I'm talking to.
Yeah.
Because I think similar to what you just said when it was press or stuff, like even when I was trying to move away from the show and I do an interview about something else, the title would be like Spencer Matthews ex Caggie Dunlop. And I was like, wait, what? That wasn't part of the conversation. And it just felt like it was kind of this thing that constantly pulled me back. And even though I don't regret doing the show and I had an amazing time, the irony was I felt very, and I think I just felt really uneasy in myself at that time in my life and very unanchored. And because, you know, the nature of reality TV, it kind of just like makes everything more manic, you know? So if you already have that in you, it just heightens the experience. Yeah. So I think for me, it was like I needed to leave to kind of find myself again. But it's always nice to hear that, you know, people thought positively of me. I had someone write something the other day about the book, but then it was like, she's come a long way since the ditzy blonde we all knew from Made in Chelsea. And it was a nice interview. And I was like, that was a bit harsh. I don't think I was that ditzy, was I?
No, I don't think you were at all. But honestly, like, there's far worse things you could be described as. Like, fuck me, they'll always want to bring up, like, they want to bring up all my arrests and that. Like, in 2012, when she did X, Y, and Z, and I'm like, oh, honestly, you just need to fuck off. I've said how sorry I am for like 20 years. Can we please just forgive me?
But it's so funny how they obviously have these things that it's just really lazy journalism where they're like
descriptive terms.
Yeah, and they're the worst ones. Yeah. You're like, please stop bringing that up. I think of it as like when people ask you about that kind of stuff, it probably for you is because it feels like this for me. It's like asking someone who they dated at university or like what they studied and then being like, so-and-so who studied this when they were at uni, even though they've had a 10-year career since. And you're like, weird. Is that really what I'm still known for? But
is that how you're measuring my worth these days? Like, it's insane to me. And always, I mean, I don't know. I think it's a lazy narrative.
It is lazy. But like, I guess that it's like clickbaity, isn't it?
Yeah, of course. And I get it. My favorite one is always like, I'll do a post on Insta and it'll be something about like fucking helping out a food bank or I don't know, loving the skin you're in, or maybe it's just me and Erkan on a date night, something quite vapid and normal, you know? And somebody underneath will go, I think it's such a shame you don't still speak to the Geordie Shore girls. Oh my God.
The comments. Don't even get me started on the if we thought I love how we're just like pulling this apart. But the comments it's like the cesspit of humanity. Sometimes when I catch some of them, I'm like, oh my God.
What have I ever done to you? Nah. But then, right. So I cringe whenever anybody wants to talk to me about Geordie Shore, but then I have to acknowledge that actually
that's where you came from.
Yeah, 110%.
Same for me.
Same. And like, I wouldn't have this lovely podcast and I wouldn't be chatting to you, having this lovely time and doing all the other nice things I get to do if I hadn't done that. So even though there are moments from that show that still, listen, I'm not even going to be hyperbolic, still haunt me. And I still feel like I was too young to navigate the position I was in. All these sort of things. I do have to say, like, I am grateful to it to a certain extent. And I wondered if you felt the same way.
I do. And I completely agree because I think it's important to acknowledge that as an opportunity. And it was like a springboard. And so I have to watch myself, even though we just talked shit about it for 20
We're
minutes.
so fickle.
But I think what it is because both of us have obviously changed so much since that time. And it feels like, particularly in the UK, people tend to want to pigeonhole people to like that thing. Whereas in the US, like we could be running for president and people would be like, you go, Vicky, you go. And it would be fine. Whereas here it's like, not everyone, but some people are like, that is the bracket that you're in. I will never see you as anything else. And that particular piece is what I found hard. But I realized that for a while I was limiting myself as well by perhaps viewing myself in that bracket of being like, I can never do other things that I want to do because I did this. Whereas now I feel like that's really starting to shift. So actually I view it in a much more positive way because of that.
But then it's really interesting what you're saying, and I absolutely agree with it. I think within the realms of reality TV, people are pigeonholed. They want a specific person to have one specific function, and that's it. So they want like a cute, like ditzy one that everyone sort of loves. They want like they want a bitch. I was going to say a sassy, straight talking one, and I was like, call a spade, Vicky. You were the bitch. So they want a bitch. They want like a stud. They want like the lovable rogue. And it's impossible.
You're being cast.
Yeah, you are. And I get it. It makes it easy to follow. It makes it almost like a pantomime for the viewer, and nobody wants to sit and think too hard when they're watching reality TV. Jesus Christ, it's not like an episode of Animal Planet. They want to relax. And I think subsequently, because of these, because when you're pigeonholed like this, that's all, even when you remove yourself from that space, that's all people think you are. And it takes a long time to change people's perspective. If you're like, Jesus Christ, mate, in the last 10 years, I've completely changed who I am. And still now, like if I go to talk on something on my Instagram, like that Kevin from fucking Barnsley thinks I've got no right talking about, like he will remind me of who I used to be to try and keep me small. I'll get the, you were nothing but a slag on the telly. And I think, you know what, Kev?
Fuck off.
Yeah, first of all, obviously, fuck off. But secondly, like that narrative, like it suits you, because
Totally.
if you focus on actually the fact that I'm not that person anymore, and perhaps that vernacular was never acceptable, but if you focus on the fact that I've grown, I've changed, I've evolved, and I do have a right to pontificate on this point now because of who I am, you will realize that you haven't grown.
Totally.
And that's what's really annoying, is you see that I've changed, but you haven't, and that makes you annoyed. That's the point here.
I love that you've just said that, because I was thinking this exact thing yesterday. And I think sometimes people, because it's so hard when someone makes these comments to you and they feel very personal, like an attack. And to a degree, like it has kept me small, because people are basically saying, stay small, stay in your box. But like you just said,
it's easier to manage for them, Caggie.
Yeah. And it is just a complete reflection of their own inability to grow and evolve. And their limitation on how they see you is not a direct correlation to like your worth or how you've evolved. It's just a direct correlation to how they view themselves or their own limitations they put on themselves.
That's it. And everyone always says, what anyone says about you says more about them than it does about you. But it's dead easy to say. But when someone's coming for you on Instagram or like in the comment section or in the press, whatever it is, it's very hard to get your head around that, because we're all only human and we just want to be liked.
Yeah. And I think I've always struggled with that, because I've always been very sensitive. And I think it was much worse actually when I was on Made in Chelsea, and I was the kind of person that I would read the comment, and I just wasn't old enough to kind of process what was happening. And I'd read like 100 nice comments and there'd be one nasty one, and I'd only see the nasty one. And I've always kind of had that, but it's got better. But even like yesterday, because obviously now I'm going on other people's podcasts and putting myself out there a bit more in a way that feels much more authentic and aligned with who I am today. But there will always be people that will say, no, stay small. We don't even listen to what she has to say because of where she came from. And for me, it was like often like, oh, she's privileged and I can't relate to this, so like she can shut up or whatever. But I have to recognize, I'm like, then I'm not speaking for those people, and I have to kind of quiet out that noise and just focus on who I am speaking to, and the people that are able to kind of actually support like where I want to go and see it as an opportunity, or like to encourage them to do the same for themselves.
And listen, like not everyone's going to like you or understand you. They're just, and that's okay. They're not your people, Caggie. Like there is plenty of people who are rooting for you, who understand you, who like you. They're your people, and we've all got people we relate to, appeal to, whatever, and people that we just quite simply don't. I used to think I could people please my way into collective. Like, honestly, mate, I was like, if I just do this, or if I just wear that, or if I just adopt, or whatever, like everything I did was so calculated. And then I thought, you know what? I'm fucking exhausting myself here. And these cons who don't like me still don't like me.
Or they're just, you're not being authentic. I completely relate to that. I feel like my whole 20s were like shape-shifting and trying to be liked and loved by everyone. I remember when people would say, oh, you can't you're not going to be for everyone. Not everyone will like you. And I found that agonizing. I was like, I have to be liked by everyone that I meet. And my means of doing that meant that I would constantly self-abandon in all these ways that by the end of it, I was like, I don't even know who I am. And I don't even really like myself because I'm chasing my worth based on being validated by these random people and just not knowing how to kind of value myself. So that was like a big part of my journey.
That resonates with me so much. And I just wanted you to know, like, I'm one of these people who really likes you.
Oh,
I really am. No, I mean, you're fucking great. And I imagine everyone listening to this is one of the people who really likes you as well. I've got lovely listeners. They're going to think you're fab.
So sweet.
I am. So often, my relationship with reality TV is like proper changed. I've done really nice ones, over the years, things like I'm a Celeb and MasterChef, which I absolutely loved. But in its purest sense, like your Geordie Shores, your Made in Chelsea's, like Love Island now, I still really struggle with that format, mate. And like all my pals are like, you're watching Love Island, blah, blah, blah. And I like to try and keep my finger on the pulse a little bit, don't want to be too much of a granny and have nothing to talk to anyone about. But I struggle to sit down and watch an episode of Love Island because what I don't just see is sun-soaked, gorgeous bodies enjoying themselves in lovely locations. I see pain sometimes. Mm-hmm. I see a young girl who doesn't have the tools to navigate the situation she's in. I see boys who are sometimes, treating women unkindly and like exacerbating the already existing insecurities. I see a situation that has clearly been manipulated by producers and I don't relax. I don't just enjoy it and consume it in the same way that I know my neighbours do when they're chatting in the group chat or my pals. I can't relax. I feel for them, I feel like I've been there and I know it's hard and all the rest of it. And granted, my position was slightly different. I fucking never looked that good in a bikini. But apart from that, like I don't enjoy it the same way because I have this kind of, I suppose, a low level PTSD because of my experiences. And I feel like I'm obviously set apart from the rest of the Geordie Shore cast in that sense because they go back, they do reunions, they obviously really love it. And I love that for them. It makes me feel a bit left out, I'm clearly the black sheep there. But I wondered if I wasn't the only one in this space who felt a bit like that.
Yeah, it's so interesting that you say that because actually, the same article that referred to me as the Ditzy Blonde also titled the article. They titled it "Saturn Returns and Made in Chelsea PTSD." I was like, oh gosh.
I have a confession, Caggie. I was the journalist. It was me.
But when I looked at it, I was like, oh, because obviously when I said it, I was sort of saying it in jest, but it is also a little bit it is a little bit true. And I as well don't like that format of reality TV. It was only last year, for the first time ever, I watched some of Love Island. I'd never watched it before. So I was completely out of the loop with the rest of the fucking UK that's watching it every night. And I just didn't know what was going on. And I didn't really have any intention of watching it because a bit like you, I watched it through a different lens.
Yeah.
I see the sort of puppeteering. I'm aware of what the producers are doing behind the scenes. It's not as like mindless TV as it is for most people. But that being said, I think when I was doing my book last year, I just wanted something to just zone the fuck out on. And so I started watching Selling Sunset. Which I was like, I'll watch, this looks like absolute crap and I'll just not get, hooks on it and I can just zone out for like an hour and then go back to writing. But then I was like, oh my God, when's the next episode? I was so obsessed with it.
We've had Mary on the podcast,
Have you?
Yeah, she's so awesome. Nice. She's so nice, but she's so like, honestly, she's so great. She's like typically American, like very well media trained. Like when I was just fresh to all this, I used to be like, because they always used to pit us against you, didn't they? Like Made in Chelsea, Geordie Shore girls, blah, 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 even though there's just seriously no comparison. Yeah, I used to be like, yeah, fuck the Made in Chelsea lot. We're far more fun on a night out. Like, I would just say the most outrageous and ridiculous things because I wanted to say whatever the journalist wanted to hear. But like Mary, who's very new to the industry, was just like, honestly, all the girls, we do really get along. Where everyone's doing their part. And like, there was just no hint of drama or like anything sensational at all. I thought, oh,
you know what? I remember one of the first bits of press I did. This is quite funny. It was like, it was the cover of something. I can't remember what, but they'd wanted me. This is really, really quite. They'd wanted me in a boxing ring. And I didn't really think anything of it because a publicist was doing like the whole thing. And anyway, they put boxing gloves on me and put me in like a ball gown. And I was like, okay, this is random. Anyway, they then like superimposed Lauren. Because she was that from the only way Essex from Towie into the same photo and then just printed it. And I was like, what the fuck? And I had absolutely no idea. No consent over that. And then it just, that was just it. And it was just this weird thing as well, because we just had so little control over like the narrative that was kind of flying around. We were like you say, playing a role.
It's like the, all that I'm thinking of is the Ronaldo and Messi picture where they were promoting, oh my God, Louis Vuitton, but they were both super important to it. They weren't there at the same time. I feel like you guys were the originals. Yous walked so they could run.
I know. Yeah, exactly. They got that idea from us.
Stolen it straight from Heat magazine or whatever it was.
Yeah, exactly.
But I remember feeling like a little bit jealous of you guys. I do. And like, again, this is like not an easy thing for me to admit, but I think, Towie had, like the girls were all like immaculate and sort of very glamorous and had this perfect smoky eyes and gorgeous big bouncy blow dries. And, that was their thing. And you guys were just effortlessly like beautiful and waif-like and sunning yourselves on some fucking luxury yacht. Whereas we always just looked like raccoons in the garage. And I honestly, it was so hard for us to watch you get like Rimmel contracts and get given free clothes and go to fancy events when nobody fucking wanted us anywhere, mate. I remember feeling a little bit jealous of you guys. Yeah, this is all coming rushing back to me. No wonder I was so mean about you in interviews. Well, I'm pleased we can laugh about it now, Cag.
I know, because even when I came on the podcast, like suddenly I had this flash and I was like, does Vicky hate me? Because I think I must have had some kind of like
beef
memory of something, of like something happening. But yeah,
no,
here we are now.
Always been a big Caggie fan, even if you said something disparaging about us in the press, or even if I was in that boxing ring with you, I wouldn't have known it was you. And I honestly deeply fangirl you. But mate, I don't want to talk too much about Made in Chelsea. Like, it is quite clearly, yes, it's been a springboard, but you're so much more and it's part of your past. In part 2, I want to talk to you all about your brand new podcast, your amazing new book, and what you've been up to now.
Amazing.
Hello everybody and welcome back to part 2 of Vicky, Pattison and Secret 2. I'm joined by my reality TV star OG, Caggie Dunlop. But as I mentioned before we took a break, you are so much more than that. Can I ask, what's your real name? Because Caggie's not it, is it?
It's not it. My real name's Catherine.
Fuck off. No, that is some next level posh shit. I did not know people were doing that. Is that normal in Chelsea? No, come on.
It's not a posh person nickname.
Is it not?
It's not. It's basically when I was born, my brother, who is like just under 2 years older, said he couldn't say Catherine and he said Caggie. And then it kind of stuck around the house. And then one day I went into school and I was like, everyone call me Caggie. And then it was with a Y. And then I was like, everyone call me Caggie with an I-E. And it was like, I used to just be obsessed with like names. There was a point where I actually changed my name completely for a bit. I'm not even going to talk about that. But anyway.
No, so please do. Like, what were you going as when you changed it? What was the alter ego, Cag? I need to know. No.
It was so embarrassing. It was Tiger. I actually, but this is not that young. I was like 18, 19, like 17, 18, 19. It was like when I started going clubbing in London. And I was like, my name's Tiger. And some of the people that I met at that time, I still know now, so they probably think I was just going through a really weird identity crisis.
Stills, I hope you're still saved in someone's phone as Tiger. That would just make me so happy.
I've never admitted that or told anyone that before. So yeah, you've heard it here first.
Wow, I feel really honoured to have an exclusive. But mate, like, you're just finding yourself at that age, like 17, 18. I don't know. I just remember thinking I had it all figured out and I was so grown up and cool. And actually, I knew fucking nothing.
Yeah. And I also, I went out because I lived in London. I went out quite young. And now I look back and I think I will be locking my daughter up, knowing the way that we behaved. Yeah. And I did think I knew it all. But yeah, I didn't.
For everyone who doesn't consume this content on a visual platform, Caggie just like wistfully looked into the distance there. It was very poetic. It was really romantic. Like, and I just didn't know it all. I love that from you. But mate, you are now in your 30s like me. And I know that we don't know it all. God, like even me ma, who's like in our sort of mid-60s, she's back in the dating scene, lass.
Is she? How's she finding it?
Sure. What I am finding is that men actually don't fucking ever grow up. She got ghosted by a 67-year-old fella.
No.
Yeah. Not bad.
That is not what she needs.
No, absolutely not. She's had a really tough time, me mum. Like, everybody knows her and my dad split up, and he was a high school sweetheart. She'd met him from 11, so it was that only, and then she had this other lovely bloke she was with, and he sadly passed away, and she's taken time to heal and everything. She's back on the scene. And honestly, like, I really did think, I bet you men are all just like, well, they're in their 60s, so they're thinking, I'm going to be honest, I'm going to be upfront. Everyone needs to know what I'm about because I want to find love and settle down. But nah, they're still playing games, still up to their old tricks, still not mature at 67. So my mum is still learning about herself, even at the right old age of 65. So even though we don't know it all in our 30s, mate, we know a lot more than we did in our teens and 20s. And it feels as though you've finally sort of, I suppose, found yourself, Cags, have you?
Yeah, I think so. Definitely a lot more. Well,
do you love this version of you?
That weirdly makes me feel so uncomfortable because it's just so like not something people like.
It's very prying. I'm being very nosy today. I think it's because I feel like I've known you for 20 years, even though I fucking haven't. Sorry,
I do. Like, I actually do, because I think my 20s were so, I look back on them and they were just quite chaotic and all over the place, and I didn't know who I was and I felt very ungrounded, whereas my 30s have just felt a lot calmer. And I know who I am, and kind of like what we spoke about in the first half, I might not be for everyone, but I'm for me. Like I live my life according to what my values are and in alignment with my integrity, and that is what's important. And so I've really enjoyed my 30s so far.
Honestly, 30s to get a bad rep, don't they? For like long hangovers and crow's feet and grey hairs and all that, and you're fucking ticking biological body clock and everything. But I'm telling you right now, I've had a really nice time.
I love we're talking about it like it's a holiday destination. I can't complain. Everything looks good here to me. But the thing that is true is the pressure cooker that women often feel, and I'm very aware of that, because the community from Saturn Returns and the podcast and stuff is women 25 to 35, and a lot of them feel this intense pressure, especially around finding the right relationship, having kids and all that stuff. So that's the only thing that's a bit of a tricky thing for us to navigate. But
yeah, it feels like we can never sort of win as women. Like you're over your pesky 20s where you're so insecure and you're just crippled by self-doubt. You finally get into a space where you're sort of like, oh, I'm okay with the way I look and my body shape is, it's not all the horrible things I thought it was. It works for me. I love it. But you finally get there and then Mother Nature goes, you got fucking 2 years. Find the man of your dreams and have a baby. Otherwise your eggs are turning to dust. You mug.
I know, it's so true.
And I was happy for like 30 seconds.
And also the way society kind of like for women, because obviously that's a big part of it, but it feels like a lot of the stuff kind of is like the narrowing of walls and the window is closing, because actually when you find out who you are and you're happy with it, then careers might change and stuff like that. But I think we're sold this idea that we have to have all of these things figured out by 30, and if we don't, we're sort of doomed to eternal damnation in some kind of way. So then everyone's so scared about turning 30, and then they do, and they're like, oh, it's actually okay. But there is still this kind of pressure.
Yeah, I get it. I sometimes think, if women are always stressed and always trying to do something else and trying to have more and all the rest of it, I suppose we're easier to control. If we're a little bit miserable and we're a little bit stressed, and I suppose we're a consumer, like a marketer's dream as well. And I blame everybody else. Yeah, but
it's like a vicious cycle, isn't it?
Yeah,
because
totally.
if women were actually taught from a young age to love themselves and feel complete, then entire industries would just collapse overnight.
The what? That is, do you know what? But then I see these lovely things on TikTok. I do think the generation that's having kids now is probably fucking mine, actually.
Mine. Well, actually, I think it's our generation.
Oh, shit. Let's get a move on. So I feel like they're trying to undo some of the damage. I see all of these amazing TikToks of little girls doing their hair in the mirror and telling like that morning affirmation, saying that they're smart and they're kind and they're capable of anything. And I always tell Mavie, that's my sister's little girl, I'm like, are you pretty? She's like, yes. And I'm like, are you smart? And she said, yeah. Are you kind? Yes. Like I tell her, and I think not that I was brought up in a bad way. I had a fantastic childhood with lovely parents, but I never was told I was great. I was never repeatedly told like, you are brilliant and the world can be anything you want it to be. Like, it probably seems really cheesy and American, but I fucking love it.
It does. In my household, you would never have heard something like that.
We were all so self-deprecating, but I want my kids to be fucking to think they are absolutely invincible. Not knobs. I don't want them to be like knobs. I don't want them to think they can't do anything wrong. Like, we will call a spade in our house, surely. But I want them to believe anything is possible.
100%. Same with me.
And sorry, mate. Again, I'm being really nosy. It's normally such a like nice little chill chat here, but are you in a happy, healthy relationship, Cag? Are you looking for love? Are you fucking taken? Go on, girl.
Taken.
You're so sneaky. Everyone knows everything about me, but you're flying under the radar now.
I know. I'm try and be quite mindful of what I share, because I'm aware that, as much as I'm an open book, and, I did this talk this week and someone was like, oh, do you ever, feel uncomfortable with how much you share and how open you are on the podcast? And I was like, I've been airing my dirty laundry for decades, like across various mediums. I did reality TV, like that's nothing. But I also have to be respectful of the fact that it's not just my story, it's also my partner's story, and he can be quite private, but I am in a very happy relationship and we've been together for 1.5 years.
Oh, buzzing, mate. Well, congratulations. I'm so happy for you.
Thank you.
I often think it's a bit of a hang up from reality, like from being on reality TV in your formative years, is you don't know what's appropriate to share and you don't know what isn't.
Yeah.
I fall prey to this all the time. Like, my agent will ring me and she'll be like, does everybody honestly have to know when you have your period? And I'm like, yes.
But this is the thing. We grew up in this way that there was nothing that was off.
Oh, yeah. Everyone had to know everything.
everyone had to know everything. And also, I don't know about you, but I became quite used to this sort of state of, not to go back there because I know we've covered it, but a state of like anxiety. So I actually find that the beautiful thing about podcasts or books is you are controlling
Ownership.
the narrative. Yeah. And that really gives it such a different feeling, because it's like you're sharing something that you are willing and wanting to share, rather than it kind of being pulled from you without you wanting it to be.
Yeah. I think it's an empowering platform. Like, that's what I've always found. You know, I love social media has plenty pitfalls, don't get me wrong, you know, and I talk about them at length when I'm being whingy and fucking ungrateful. But predominantly, I love the chance to show the real side of me, rather than like the 42-minute edited version that MTV thought people wanted to see, you know? I love being able to show that, you know, I'm compassionate and I've got interests outside of Jägermeister. It's lovely to be able to show a real insight to you. And I think a podcast,
it's my favorite medium for doing that.
It's an extension of that. Do you absolutely love it? So what's the format of yours, Cag? Do you get guests, or is it just you chatting every week?
I have guests. So we'll have different guests and I sometimes do solo episodes. And we've just launched like a subscription solo series where it's just kind of my thoughts and musings for the week. But we'll have guests come on that are a range of different people. But the umbrella of the whole kind of show and the brand is Saturn Returns. So it's got an astrology spin, but essentially it's personal development through that lens. So we'll have different people talking about different themes that really we all have to navigate in our 20s as we kind of initiate into adulthood. And then often finding more sort of esoteric ones around themes and kind of niche subjects that I find interesting that perhaps people wouldn't have heard of before. And that's always quite fun.
So I feel like it sounds amazing and super interesting. And particularly, like, you know, the personal development side of things, like it's so, I don't want to say hot right now for a number of reasons. I don't want to say it because I feel like it makes me sound like a bellend. But it's also, I feel like it's true though, isn't it? Like when I was younger, like it was all just about saving up to go to Magaluf to see how many boys you could kiss, you know, like that's, you know, binge drinking and blah, X, Y, and Z. Now I feel like people are far more invested in personal development, in growth, in having life experiences and being the best version of themselves. And I think it's a really healthy shift.
Really healthy.
Yeah. You can't deny it's hot right now.
It is kind of hot right now. And so is astrology, actually. And I think it's to do.
Well, there's even a dating show, Cag. We had a couple of women on who were like the astrologers for a dating show.
Was this the Discovery dating show?
Written in the stars?
It is definitely. And like with all the apps and just, I think it's because of social media that people are getting this information in a very digestible way. And that's how it's kind of, and then people are like, oh, that's actually really helpful, or that makes me feel seen and understood. And then also I think it's because we've moved away as a society, mainly in the kind of Western culture, of like religion doesn't play quite the same role that it used to. And I think we have an appetite for something that kind of is more spiritual, that's something we can believe in. And I think that's why astrology is kind of having its moment again.
Well, we all want to believe in something. Like, I don't care, you know, where you're from, how you've been brought up, whatever. Everybody needs hope. And we all need a sense of like a belief system. And I did a show for the BBC recently called The Pilgrimage. And it's where like a group of people from different religious backgrounds all get together and complete a religious pilgrimage, obviously. And it was dead interesting, you know, like I don't think religion, like you say, has as big of a place in current society. But as I was going through and learning about other peoples and blah, blah, I'm agnostic myself. Like the predominant thing that I realized is we just all have to have something to believe in, because otherwise it's a bit sad. Like the idea that, the idea that there's nothing happens when you're gone, or the idea that you're not working towards something, or it's all just a bit sad. So I can see why people are finding hope and solace in astrology now.
Yeah, because it gives it this very unifying sort of everything's happening for you and for a reason. But also it's very unique and personal because your chart is so unique and personal. So you kind of have this feeling of being part of something in a collective whilst also feeling seen. And I think especially when we go through moments of struggling with our own identity and our own sense of self, that can allow people to kind of deepen their understanding of what their unique gifts are, what their path is. So that's kind of how I use it. It's like a tool for personal development and introspection.
I'm a Scorpio, Cag, right? And I feel like we get such... Don't laugh. I knew it. No, but I feel like we get such a bad rep, right? But I actually love being a Scorpio. I feel like we're like quite a powerful sign in the zodiac. I feel like we have a sting in our tail, which is not something I'm going to deny having. Like, I quite like being one. In terms of Taurus and Scorpio, would we get on? God, I'm sounding more and more like a fangirl.
I mean, I don't really prescribe to the like, oh, you know, will certain star signs getting on and others not. I don't use it that.
It's not that way. Do you think that's a bit gimmicky?
I think it is a bit gimmicky because also it's so much more complex than just your star sign or your sun sign. Because, I mean, then you have your moon and your rising, but even within a chart, there are so many variables. But I don't, off the top of my head, I don't know whether, I've never heard that Scorpio and Taurus are necessarily get along, but I haven't heard that they don't. I think I've often gravitated towards, I know I've got a couple of people in my life that I'm very close to that have Scorpio placements, and they do have that like where they're
edge.
Like lovely.
Let's call it an edge.
I'm like, whoa, where did that come from? So yeah, that's why I laughed when you said you're a Scorpio.
It was such a smug little giggle as well. Right, before I chat you a little bit more about your book as well, I need to ask, I always hear people being like, oh yeah, well don't worry because Mercury's in retrograde. And I'm like, yeah, okay, I won't then. Fuck it. Mercury's in retrograde. I don't know what it means, Caggie, and I'm sick of pretending to acting like I do. Tell me what it means.
Okay, so basically retrograde is when like Mercury, essentially it's the illusion that it's going backwards. So Mercury is about like messenger, it's like associated with the messenger communication technology. So during that time when people are saying like, oh, everything's going to go haywire, it's because often things in communications break down. So whether that's an email that you thought you sent, you actually sent, you know, to the wrong person, or it didn't send at all, or like something goes wrong in technology, or on a more sort of personal level with your partner, like there's just a communication breakdown and you just misunderstood a situation. And so there's like tension or an argument might happen. So those are kind of the main things that happen during that time. And that's why people get a little bit like, prepare for Mercury retrograde, in the same way that I guess Saturn returns. Everyone's like, prepare for your Saturn return, because that's often viewed as a scary thing. But I don't know. I guess, to be honest, when Mercury is retrograde, I notice things that happen rather than look out for them. I'm slightly mindful of like emails and stuff like that because I am a bit like chaotic anyway. Like I've done things when I've sent an email that's a really important one that I've rewritten a couple of times because it's really important, and then I've actually accidentally sent
all the drafts.
Send the email with another email at the bottom of it, being like, oh my god! But that wasn't even in retrograde; it was just me.
That was just a Tuesday.
It was just an average Tuesday, and then yeah, in my relationship, often, like if there's like a communication breakdown, I'm like, well, Mercury's retrograde. My boyfriend's like, okay, sure, whatever you say. I was
just going to say, I feel like Mercury is in retrograde a lot in our house. They kind of always like fucking chalk and cheese. I want to know, so your book is called the same thing, right? Saturn Returns.
Yeah.
And that is just like building on the themes of the podcast.
Yeah, so your Saturn return, like in astrology, is something that happens in your late 20s. So at around 28, 29, Saturn returns to the same place in the sky it was when you were born. And within the sort of realms of that. Yeah, so it takes like that amount of time to kind of do a full like orbit of the Earth. And when it does, it brings with it these sort of initiations, and it's like associated with karma and with discipline and with responsibilities. So if, like me, you haven't been living in a very Saturnian fashion and you've been incredibly irresponsible and undisciplined, it's like a bit of a drop kick from the universe to kind of snap you into place. And all these lessons feel like they're coming quick fire, and it's
Did you
just
find
a
that
lot.
transition hard, Caggie, or
Yeah,
is that
that's
why you
why
got
I
into
created the
this?
podcast. Yeah, because it was during that time where I was like, what
the fuck is going on?
What the fuck is going on? And then someone was like, you're about to go through your Saturn return. I was like, okay. And I just became really fascinated by that subject. It's weird. Like, you know how you just have these affiliations or connections with things or places? Like, for me, it was just like, Saturn return, what an interesting concept.
Well,
and
it
then
really
when
resonated with you, obviously, didn't it? So that would be...
Yeah, it did. And it initially started when I started like writing I wanted it to maybe be a script or something. I didn't really know, but I was like, I'm going to do something around Saturn return. Like, I love this point in one's life. And then when I actually went through it, and it was once I was out the other side that I could really see, I was like, holy shit, that really, really happened. And I learned so much in the process. And then really putting out the podcast was like, how can I create a toolkit for people that are navigating times of transition and change? Because at that time, I was being asked by a lot of people, like, have you considered doing a podcast? And I knew that I wanted to, but then it was like, okay, maybe I'll take that subject that I had thought about a few years ago and actually put it out as a podcast. And then, yeah, it kind of went from there. And then the book is really just an extension of that, but more personal, perhaps. There's probably more vulnerability in the book. And that's about, the main things and the main hurdles that I felt or experienced during my 20s into my 30s.
I think when you're sitting, so podcasts, you can have fun and it's an hour and it can be, very much surface chat. Even if you're talking about things that are, emotional, it's still not enough time to get proper into the bones or something. But a book, I've wrote a couple myself. I always find that it's really like a therapeutic experience. It's very cathartic. You sit down and you pour stuff out of, it feels like your soul. And yeah, I've always come away from the experience feeling a little bit lighter, but also that I've shared a lot of myself. It's draining.
You get a bit of a vulnerability hangover after, because you're like, oh, wow, I remember it was when I was reading the audiobook out.
Oh,
and there
mate,
was
I sobbed my tits out doing my... Sobbed my tits off, yeah. Honestly, it was terrible. Like, the fella who was recording it at one point just fucking stopped and brought a box of tissues in. He's like, are you all right? I was like, clearly I'm not, Derek.
Yeah, because it's quite hard when you've just got one man that you're like narrating your life story to. And it's just this because they're not an audience, but you're just looking at them like they are. And it is confronting. Because a lot of the stuff, I don't know about you, like the stuff I put in the book, it's raw and honest. It's not necessarily stuff that I've like figured out. Sometimes it's stuff that I'm still
processing.
Yeah, and still navigating. So it feels that, yeah, a bit more raw.
Well, I know even if the process was hard and it was a bit of a struggle, it was emotional, like you're definitely helping women. Like women at an age where, we're under so much pressure to have it all figured out and we feel like a failure if we look on Instagram and everyone's got like a fucking tidy house and matching outfits with their kids and we don't have those things. Like I think what you're providing for women at that age and at that critical time in their lives is a super imperative service. So I just want to say you should pat yourself on the back, Cag.
Oh, thank you. That is so sweet.
You're welcome. I mean it from the bottom of my heart, mate. And before I let you go, because I'm aware that you're a busy lady, here at Vicky Pattison, The Secret To, we always ask our gorgeous guests to give our lovely listeners a couple of pearls of wisdom. And I think something you said at the start of the podcast has really stuck with us. We had similar experiences in our 20s. We felt displaced. We felt unsure of ourselves, morphing into people that we thought other people wanted us to be. But now you're quite clearly a very confident, comfortable version of you. And I think you should be proud of that. But also I think other people would like to know what your secret is. So what is your secret to feeling anchored?
Just to be true to yourself, because, like you just mentioned, so much of my life in my 20s were shape-shifting to perform and be validated by other people. And it wasn't until, you know, I went through my Saturn return that I was like, okay, I'm actually going to just remain true to myself, with little idea of who that person actually was. But once I started sort of cultivating that and figuring out what I valued and living in alignment with it, everything kind of became more grounded and more anchored. So that would be my advice. Don't try to be for everyone.
Just be for you.
Just be for you.
Oh, mate, I could cry. That was absolutely Oh, do you know what? It's been so lovely talking to you. I could have chatted to you all afternoon.
I know, it's been so nice. I feel like we've known each other for so long.
This is the one of the pitfalls of watching you for years on reality TV. I'm your fucking best pal. Mate, good luck with everything. Good luck with the podcast and the book. If you could get us a copy, I wouldn't mind reading that.
Yes, I will send you a copy, 100%.
Please sign it, because I'm a fan.